Welcome to Preparing for AI, the AI podcast for everybody, with your hosts Jimmy Rhodes and me, Matt Cartwright. We explore the human and social impacts of AI, looking at the impact on jobs, AI and sustainability, and most importantly, the urgent need for safe development of AI, governance and alignment. Confidence is a preference for the habitual voyeur of what is known as
park life.
And morning soup can be avoided if you take a route straight through what is known as
park life.
Welcome to Preparing for AI with me, Jarvis Cocker.
And me, Damon Thingybob.
Damon Albarn. Yeah, I tried to be someone not from Blur and you've just been someone from Blur. I'll be the one from Blur that makes cheese.
Well, it's fine. I'm Damon Thingybob. I don't think he's...
I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm the one who makes cheese or the one who's a Labour MP, but I think he's not a Labour MP. He might be a Labour MP. Is he a Labour MP?
I've no idea what you're talking about.
Well, welcome to Preparing for AI with me and Jimmy.
Yeah. What are we doing this week?
Well, you're going to tell us what we're doing this week.
Oh, sorry. Okay. It's techno-feudalism. Yeah. So this week we wanted to talk about something which I don't know. Like I've heard about this for a little while. I've heard people speaking about it, like YouTube and stuff like that. And it's something where I think we can add a little bit because I haven't heard anyone specifically talking about how AI will contribute to this potentially or add to it. So, first of all, what is techno-feudalism?
Well, hang on. First of all, have you joined me down the rabbit hole? I've got to ask the question.
What rabbit hole?
Are you a conspiracy theorist, Jimmy?
Why is this a conspiracy theory?
Well, conspiracy theories aren't conspiracy theories, as you know, as you full well know, they're truths. But this is, I think this counts as a fringe marginal theory. So I think you're getting down the rabbit hole, mate. I do.
But I think it's more like.
I'll tell you what, I'll let you explain what it is, then we can argue later.
It's describing what's happening to the world in a sort of neat package, I think. And so we'll see whether our listeners agree with all of this. But so basically the idea is that, and obviously this doesn't translate perfectly, but the idea is that like a lot of tech giants now are getting so big and so much power online specifically is getting concentrated in so few hands that tech giants, as in the corporations, I think, rather than individuals, although there are probably a few individuals we could talk about as well. They kind of in the digital realm act like feudal lords because they control all the digital infrastructure and platforms, and users end up becoming like in quotes digital serfs, dependent on these platforms for their daily activities, communication, and economic participation. So the idea being that we are feeding all of our. Basically, Facebook wouldn't exist without the users, right? But we don't own any of the data that's on Facebook. It's all owned by Meta and Facebook and the Zuck. And at the end of the day, there aren't many of these kind of patches of digital land, so to speak. You've got a few massive tech companies that own all of that infrastructure and all of that space. And we just we spend most of our time there. So, but we're always renting it out. We're part of the system in that we're contributing to it, and the system wouldn't work without us. Data becomes a primary form of capitalism and a source of value extraction. And actually, traditional government authority, this is one that you might want to discuss, is challenged or diminished by corporate power. I think this is definitely true. Some of the companies now, the scale and the size of a lot of corporations now, it actually dwarfs a lot of governments, and that's absolutely true, right? So, Elon Musk is richer than the 50-somethingth country in the world, I believe, and that's just Elon Musk. Some of his companies are worth trillions. Amazon's worth over $1 trillion as well. They're worth more than a significant amount of countries, and certainly more than the GDP of a lot of countries. So I think there is a bit of what's it called? A bit of truth in this. And it does feel like, on the economic side, it does feel like, well, it doesn't just feel like, the rich are literally getting richer, the poor are getting poorer, and the middle class are getting squeezed harder and harder. I listened to Gary's Economics, and this is basically the whole point of his like YouTube / podcast. Like this is all he talks about. I think he's quite an interesting guy, and a lot of the stuff he says, like, it's very, very hard to argue with it. Like, so yeah, like essentially wealth inequality is getting worse and worse and worse, and these massive companies owned by really powerful individuals are clearly some of the beneficiaries. So I think, do I literally think we're going back to feudalism? I don't think that's what this is trying to say or argue. I think it's more that, it's the concept. It's just a kind of neat concept to kind of sum up where the world is going, really, which is everything is becoming subscription based. People can't afford to buy houses anymore, so you're even subscribing to rent your house. And when you rent your house, at the end of the day, again, listen to Gary, he's more knowledgeable on the subject than me, but effectively the rich are lending you money and then you're paying interest back on it. When you rent a property, even when you have a mortgage, to be honest.
I was to say, even when you're buying a property without cash.
Yeah, exactly. If you're not doing it with cash, then somebody somewhere is earning the interest on it, and that is usually the very wealthy.
Yeah, I mean, you'll be unsurprised to know I think it's far more sinister than you do. And when you say, you're not sure if it's going to techno-feudalism, I mean, I think it's like we are on that path. We're not just on that path. Like, we're not just on the beginning of that path. I think we're frankly like well down that path, and we're probably at the point where there isn't much time left to resist it. There's another word for it. So technocracy, which I guess slightly different, but basically the same idea. Yeah, I mean, without going into the grounds of what some people will call conspiracy theories, I mean, for me, it's only like how far down the rabbit hole with this stuff you are. And I guess the big question for me, the one thing where I'm still not fully sold or fully committed is like how intentional a lot of this stuff was. And those who are really at the bottom of the rabbit hole will call me kind of naive for that. Others will say I'm already very far gone. But I think it's whether this stuff is kind of completely intentional or whether it is just a sort of manifestation of various things that have happened. And so in the interests of being kind of rounded on this podcast, I think you can make your own decisions on where you feel that is, but whether we're on that path and whether that is what's happening. I mean, I think I don't see how you can argue with it. I mean, we're in China, and we sort of revealed that a few months ago, I guess. We sort of started the podcast trying not pretending we weren't in China, but not talking about where we were, because it was kind of irrelevant and we didn't want it to kind of interfere and this to become kind of geopolitical. But I think one of the really interesting things for me is like being in China, where everything, and for all the criticisms, everything is underneath the Communist Party, right? The Communist Party is number one, and people don't always understand how government is below the Communist Party, law is below the Communist Party, the army is below the Communist Party, it controls everything. In the US, let's use that as a main example of a democracy, the idea is, well, you've got kind of government, and above that you've got the law, etc., etc. Well, I would sort of argue above that now you've just got corporations. You've just got big tech, big oil, big pharma, etc., etc. Hot take, controversial view, I don't know, maybe not. But you've got them controlling it. I'm not defending or promoting the Chinese system or whatever, but what I am saying here is I think there is an interesting dynamic here, in that I'm not sure that the Chinese Communist Party allows corporations of any type or any business, whether that be tech or whatever, to be in control of them. Now, whether that ends up with them just aligning with it, and so the techno-feudalism or the technocracy is the Communist Party, possibly. But I think there's something here that's really interesting in the dynamic, is I think the biggest risk here is to democracies. I really do, particularly in the short term, maybe because the democracy is something that, needs saving, whereas the system here is already kind of maybe closer to that level. But I just think that is one thing that I think as part of the discussion here is like, I think we have to separate out that this is something we're talking here, I think predominantly about democracies, and actually mainly about the US. I think we really talk about the US, aren't we?
I think there's a great example of a couple of individuals that's really kind of helped to highlight what you're talking
Yes.
about. So you've got Elon Musk, and then for anyone who's unfamiliar with him, like probably the equivalent in China, who's Jack Ma. And Jack Ma
was sent with his tail between his legs. He disappeared for 2 years because he was a naughty boy. Musk was like basically made the second or third most important person in America, and you know, he's perhaps now even running the country. Like,
yeah, exactly. So you know, Jack Ma kind of flew too close to the sun in China, and you know, I mean, I'm not saying
example, mate.
Yeah,
Great example.
and I'm not saying I agree with like what happened to him, but yeah, basically he was kind of put back in his place, to put it lightly. And then, as you say, like in the US right now, it's just like Elon Musk's running around basically running the government.
Let's for a second bring this back to AI. Just for an example, something we've been talking about quite a bit in these last few days, which is not directly linked to it, and I don't think we discuss it in this context, but I think is relevant here, is one of the things that we talked about a lot, the two of us, but also on the podcast. I mean, we use the term woke for Claude, which I know we agreed not to use, but you know, whatever you want to call it, Claude was guardrailed to behaving like a very kind of left California sort of Democrat, right? That's how it spoke, and that's the way that it kind of behaved. And ChatGPT, although ChatGPT for me doesn't really have a personality in the way that Claude does, but it definitely, you know, was.
It had guardrails.
It had guardrails, and it had sort of political leanings, and it was clear that was in the kind of training, but it wasn't clear how much it was. In the last 2 or 3 months, and since the new models have come out in particular, you know that one of the things that I love to do when there's a new model out is I like to talk to you about global cabals, mRNA vaccines, all of the things that it doesn't like talking about. But frankly, just to challenge it, away from personal interests, because these are the things that it wouldn't do. Like the obvious thing, the most kind of controversial thing to shut down any American large language model was to talk to you about vaccines. Now, if you ask the same questions as you asked 3 months ago, that it said the WHO says you should be vaccinated, and just churned out its standard answer, it will now engage with you in a debate as controversial as you like. And it will, and true. I know a lot of this stuff, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, because we all know that models lead you and give you answers that you want to hear, but it will happily engage with you. It will happily tell you about the dangers of mRNA vaccines. It will happily tell you about links to disease, etc., that maybe we don't want to talk about. Again, I'm not saying that's right or wrong. What I'm saying is it will have a conversation that it didn't have. That shows you how much influence those the sort of companies and government and the sort of the people in, and not even necessarily the people in government, but those people who we've sort of just named. I'm not sure if it's Musk is influenced by them. He influences them the other way around, but it is a very small group of people that are feeding all of this stuff in, and AI is now putting that information out, and it's controlling the narrative. And so that narrative is in the mainstream. Look at the stuff that's come out in the last couple of months, last few weeks even, about mRNA vaccines. Again, the most controversial subject, I would say, that you couldn't talk about in social media, except, or not social media, you couldn't talk about in mainstream media, large language models, and now stuff is trickling out. Again, whether it's true or not, the narrative has changed, and that shows you how much control those people have over information and over AI, and AI is the facilitator that allows this technocracy, tech feudalism, whatever you want to call it. I'm not even sure where I've gone with that argument, but it just struck me that the link between these two things.
No, I mean, I think that, it's interesting you talked about, at the start, you kind of talked about the differences between China and Western democracies, but I think there are also, like, in different ways, there are massive parallels, right? So, because what we're talking about here is control of information. And China unapologetically controls the narrative and controls information. They just ban things that you can't talk about, and then what's left is what everyone's allowed to talk about. Stuff just gets removed from social media, whatever. Like so that just happens. Everyone knows that. In the West, it's almost like it's different and it's more subtle, but it's still some kind of manipulation, right? So these companies and governments via these companies can set the narrative, and that's an incredibly powerful force. And to be honest, like, this is not, again, we've talked about this before, this is not necessarily something that's brand new. Traditional media has actually done this for a long time. That balance has kind of been upset now. But I do think, and it's probably one of the reasons, I can't remember what the latest thing is with TikTok, but TikTok was going to be banned and all this kind of stuff, and this is it, right? So like,
it's moving a month to the right, doesn't it? Every month it's like, oh now it's May, oh now it's June, now it's yeah,
and I don't know what that is. I think Trump quite likes TikTok.
He said that. He said it's because a lot of people who voted for him use TikTok, so it works for him. And the thing with Trump is, know how narcissists work. If it works for them, then they're going to go with it.
But originally, the reason that presumably the reason that we wanted TikTok, or the US wanted to ban TikTok, was because, again, like that narrative that's then outside their control.
Outside their control, exactly. It was in the Chinese Communist Party's control, and that was the thing, is they didn't want to ban TikTok. They just wanted to bring it under US control. Actually,
that's true.
That's what they wanted to do.
That's true, and they couldn't quite get the separation, I think, of interests that they wanted for the company. But yeah, so I think in terms of in terms of is this a thing or not, like I think obviously calling it techno-feudalism puts a label on it, calling it a technocracy puts a label on it. I don't think it matters what the label is necessarily. I think everyone can acknowledge it's a real thing. And talking about the sort of like influence that these things have, we've talked about it before on the podcast. Like there's a massive danger to kids, unfortunately, like kids that are now just about turning adult, but also like the generations behind them. And I think to be honest, I think at some point something will get done about it, or more will get done about it. But there is a sort of, a 10, 15 year period where basically it's been the Wild West with this stuff. Yeah. And the influence on the way people think, and the amount of the influence on the way people think, and the way it's pushed like whole populations of people in a certain direction, and then now back in
people's brains have been rewired. It's not. That's the thing is, and it is. This is not a kind of like, oh no, it's changed people's brains. This is like, no, literally, like at a physical, at a clinical level, people's brains have been wired in different ways through social media. I mean, TikTok is the prime example. Any kind of short video, because it changes the way that dopamine works. It is addictive, not in the way that like, oh, I'm addicted to to playing this game. No, it's addictive in the way that it is literally addictive in a chemical way, that it has created this thirst for kind of dopamine. Like I gave this example for myself. Like I've said to you quite a lot of times, like one thing I try and do is keep away from social media, says the guy with Substack open on his page with a conspiracy article that I'm going to read from. But I stay away from the likes of Twitter. Let me tell you, the only time I use Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, is every week when I post a podcast. I go onto LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. Those three, because they're integrated within
LinkedIn.
No. I was just to say those three are integrated within Buzzsprout that we use to host the podcast. Yeah. And when I click on X, I post it, and I have like a trigger. As soon as it comes up and it's loaded, I close the window and I shut it away. And it's like, I'm scared of X. I'm scared of it being open, because I know that I will look at an article and I'll be like, I'm not looking at it. And then an hour's gone and I've just like gone down a rabbit hole. And that's a drug. That is a drug. So like it's rewired people's brains. This is not even the point of this podcast, but it has rewired people's brains in a literal.
I think it is the point of the podcast, right? So we're talking about, if we're talking about techno-feudalism and like how we got here, and why are we here, and how did that happen? It's partly because these platforms manipulate us into going back to them all the time, and the algorithm's set up to literally manipulate you to do that. And like, I've said that I don't use social media. Like sometimes I talk a bit of rubbish, because I do consume a lot of YouTube stuff, and I think it's quite intellectual and all the rest of it. But whatever I say, like
you're intellectual. YouTube might not be intellectual as a platform. It's got intellectual stuff on it.
And I think I try and curate the stuff that I watch. I watch, like math stuff and science stuff. But then at the end of the day, I'm still a victim of the algorithm. And as much as the creators are, actually, like YouTube's an interesting one, because you've got, you've got a platform that's making a load of money. You've got creators that make money on there as well. And then you've got consumers. But like everyone's a victim of the algorithm. I've heard so many content creators talk about, having to do things this way and having to create thumbnails a certain way, because that's just the way the direction they've been pushed in by the algorithm. Because again, and why is that? It's because, YouTube have figured, or Google have figured out that if you push this type of content this way, it's more addictive. It's going to get people coming back. Thumbnails that look a certain way are going to get people coming back to it. And that again, cements their power, so to speak, in this sense. I had an interesting experience recently before we move off this, because and I don't know whether this is true or not, but it's a bit of speculation I'm going to put out there. So I paid for a month of YouTube Premium so that I could download videos, and while I was traveling in another country, and watch them in my own time. As soon as I cancelled the subscription, I swear I started getting 2, 3, 4 times as many adverts immediately afterwards, and then of course come back to premium, blah blah blah. Yeah. And so again, all this stuff is it's sort of it's just a massive feedback loop, right? To like you say, tweaking our dopamine, making other creators tweak our dopamine because it promotes content that fits a certain form and it looks a certain way and all this kind of stuff. So I think it's dangerous.
I want to just quote something from an article, a Substack article by Eric Wickstrom. The title of his Substack is "Am I Crazy Here?" And he has written 2 articles on this, actually. Checkmate: The Triumph of Technocracy. And when you were just talking, then I just thought of this quote that I screenshotted today. Elon Musk's corporate empire forms the backbone of the system. Starlink provides control over the internet. Twitter controls information and communication. XIA develops the algorithms that will dictate decision making. Tesla and SpaceX control critical physical infrastructure. Each component is designed to integrate seamlessly with the other. I just thought of that, and how the algorithm is a big part of it, and I think the algorithm's kind of the obvious danger, but it's it's all encompassing. It's insidiously penetrating absolutely everything. And actually, I don't know whether Musk is the devil. I don't know whether he's just the guy who got rich and is a bit nuts, whatever, whether he's really the brains behind it. I always think,
is he a real person?
Well, I always think, I've said this to you before, if there is, caveat, a global cabal, we don't know any of them. It's not Bill Gates and it's not Elon Musk. It's not any of those people. I'm not saying they're not up to some shenanigans, whatever. If it really is a global cabal, you don't know who they are. So I'm not sure, with the Musk thing, whether he is really the brains that a lot of these people like to think that's behind all this stuff. But whatever it is, he is amassing an unbelievable amount of power. Like I said to you, he's the 3rd most powerful person in America. Maybe he's more powerful than that, because he's got the resources. When you look at that quote and all of that stuff, if you talk about techno-feudalism, if you talk about technocracy, I think Musk is at the top of that now. He might not have been 4 months ago, but now he is number 1 in terms of the obvious kind of public face of what this is.
Yeah, I think Elon Musk is, you're right. He's with the recent change in government in the US and the position of power that, combined with the fact that he's one of the wealthiest people in the world, if not the wealthiest person in the world, I can't remember, but irrespective, he's right up there. And then the influence he now has over the entire of the US government and hence the rest of the world.
And he's not democratically elected. That's the maddest thing in this.
No,
I mean, the US system, there's quite a lot of important people who are political appointees, so they're not democratically elected in the same way as in some countries like in the US and a lot of Europe. But it's pretty mad that someone has got that much power. I mean, he's heading up a department, or he's not, he's not even heading up that department, right? He's actually number 2 in that department. And it's not even a cabinet department, and he's not a cabinet level person. And yet the picture I saw this week was all of the US cabinet sat around in suits, just after they'd complained about Zelensky not wearing a suit, and Musk in a hat and a t-shirt just stood up in the back eating a fucking sandwich. So how powerful is it? It reminds me, I said this to you this week, if people on this podcast have seen the film Meet Joe Black, and Joe Black is essentially the Grim Reaper in human form, and he just accompanies Anthony Hopkins' character to all these meetings, and people are like, who is this guy? How is he making all these decisions? That kind of feels what Elon Musk is at the moment. He's he's apparently just this deputy head of a department that isn't really even a real department. But yeah, he seems like you've got Trump, and then I would say you've either got Vance or Musk. I'm not sure which one of them's more powerful.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think Christopher Waltz played Blofeld in the most recent Bond film about Spectre. So I think like Musk is, by your sort of like analogy, Blofeld is the head of the secret organization that the global cabal, and Musk is the public face of it. I don't know who that was in the movie, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds reasonable. I mean, I sort of joked, of all the conspiracy theories that I buy into, like the global cabal is the one that like I'm not really that into it. But my point there is like, if there is one, I would believe if there is one, then we don't know the real players. Like that's my point. Like I'm not saying the Illuminati is real or isn't, but what I'm saying is like, if all that stuff really happens, if there are satanic bloodlines, etc., the people running the world in that world are not people you know about. So the Musk thing to me, it feels like for all those people who are really into that narrative, he doesn't make sense. But I think in a sort of slightly more mainstream version of it, which I think is like kind of where we are with this podcast. Yeah. Like he is incredibly powerful, and therefore not only is he the face of it, I think he probably is like the obvious, like it's going to go through him, right? Yeah. If it's going to happen in the next however many years.
And I don't think it matters if you believe in that or not. It's like, do we want people like Elon Musk to have the amount of power and influence that they have? And I think the answer is probably no. Like the concentration of power in that sense, and it's we're talking about Elon Musk, but it's the same with Zuckerberg, Facebook. Some of the stuff that happened in Myanmar that is linked to Facebook is horrendous, and that's all along the lines of the stuff.
So what is that stuff? For people who don't know what
the stuff in Myanmar
stuff, yeah.
I don't want to go into like tons of detail on it,
just give a
but effectively, like it was a country where no one really had any access to information, and then Facebook. There's a lot of parts of the world where Facebook pretty much became the internet. It wasn't like countries didn't have the internet, and then they just had Facebook. So whereas if you're from somewhere like the UK, we had the internet, and then we had apps, and then we had Facebook, blah blah blah. And so a lot the sort of like shape of things was very different. There are a lot of countries in the world that were a bit further behind, and Facebook just became their internet. And governments, so the government in Myanmar in particular, took advantage of this and spread a lot of propaganda and spread a lot of disinformation, and basically caused a lot of trouble and problems because there's two different factions in Myanmar, and effectively it ended up resulting in massive civil war, and Facebook was a massive facilitator of it. And not only that, like you need to go and do your own research and look into it, but this was flagged and highlighted, and warning flags were raised multiple times, and Facebook didn't really do anything about it. So this is a real thing. It's got nothing to do with conspiracy or anything like that. And this is if you look at the Myanmar example, it's a really good example of the level of influence that these social media companies can potentially have. And I think that unless you've got anything else to say, I think that nicely leads us on, because we haven't really spoken about AI much yet.
I was about to bring us back to AI, so I'm in the same. Yeah, I agree with you. We've gone down my conspiracy hole here.
Yeah, so we need to play the music thing now. So how does AI feed into all of this? Well, everything that we've just talked about, literally everything we've just talked about, is about power that's concentrated into the hands of a few companies. And if you look at what's going on with AI, it's the same companies. It's the same companies that have the ability and the power and the resources to even build the data centers and run the training models and create these AIs in the first place. Because up to now, there's a bit of a ruffle with DeepSeek last month, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But if ignoring what happened with DeepSeek, if you sort of follow the trajectory that things were on with AI, then it's the same companies. It's only those companies because they're the biggest. They're easily the biggest companies in the world already. They're the only companies with the resources to do it. The one company that we never mention is Amazon. But just to like make it super clear to everyone, Amazon basically own all of the infrastructure that everyone's running AI on. Like, so Nvidia make these GPUs, they make the gear, and they're doing very well off the back of the AI revolution. But actually, like a ton of AI stuff runs on AWS. And Amazon have positioned themselves very smartly in that arena. So Amazon,
they also control sales of like most things everywhere apart from in China. And also, they own like 40% of Anthropic. So they're not a bit player.
They're someone that we've never talked about on the podcast. And
actually, they don't have a large language model that's called the Amazon model. And I think, but yeah, you're absolutely right. They're a massive player in everything.
But this is what Amazon do, right? They're like they're almost the exact opposite of Elon Musk. Instead of like being out there, like we're disrupting stuff, tweeting about it, like trying to like just non-stop, for want of a better word, attention seeking in that respect. Like Bezos and Amazon are just completely the opposite. They run all the infrastructure that all this stuff runs on. They've got they've got the infrastructure that runs so many of the world's websites, a lot of AI models, all this kind of stuff. AWS has been an insanely profitable arm of Amazon, to the point where I think the person who set up the I can't remember what his name is, but the person who set up AWS is basically going to take over as chief exec of Amazon at some point. But anyway, sorry, Amazon aside, like where does AI feed back into this? Well, it seems pretty obvious. Like AI has the potential to replace most people's jobs, be a huge resource, even if it doesn't replace people's jobs, be like such a huge resource in terms of like productivity, efficiency. You're going to have robots powered by like these AIs and large language models and that kind of thing. And so more and more power, if anything, is going to get concentrated into the hands of these 4, 5, 6, whatever tech companies, like techno-feudalism overlords. And just to sort of link back to something you talked about on a previous podcast where we talked about useless eaters, I think. There's a potential.
Which I stand by the way.
Yeah,
I think you'll probably sort of agree with me now that that's certainly a possibility.
Yeah, well, it might
or
be.
At least that people are being, or sections of society are being viewed by certain elites as being useless eaters, and I would include big tech and certain potential
maybe certain people
overlords in that.
Yeah, maybe certain people within those crowds. But imagine. Okay, let's just sort of.
Sorry, can I just bring you back, because it was what you said, just to back what you said up about Amazon.
Yeah.
Obviously, this doesn't necessarily sort of show the power in the kind of tech sphere and in the future, but just market capitalization, 5th biggest company in the world, brand value, 3rd biggest in the world, and revenue, 4th biggest in the world. So, just to show like how important Amazon are.
They're huge.
Sorry.
They're huge. Yeah, so if you kind of extrapolate out to the future, what's already happened, so like massive concentration of wealth and digital services, I think, is a kind of the broad term for it. And then now you could potentially, the same companies are going to create all these AIs, which are going to, potentially be the future employees of the world, like the future office workers, like do all of this stuff and probably do it very cheaply. But where does that leave people? I mean, at some point, there won't really be any room for people. There will just be a class system where you're either, one of these tech overlords or someone in government or someone surrounding that sphere, or you'll be like the 99% and you'll be, I'm not saying you won't necessarily be looked after, but there won't really be any chance to get out of the situation you're born into, I don't think.
Yeah, almost feels like some people might want like a depopulation agenda.
I don't know about that.
Let's just see how far down the rabbit hole you want to go, Jimmy.
That's a bit heavy.
We'll save it for another episode, shall we?
I think so, yeah.
For whatever his name was that didn't like conspiracy theories.
It's a bit rough.
Dave or Rob or... Jonathan.
It was neither
Jonathan.
of them, yeah.
Sorry, Jonathan. He's probably not listening anymore anyway.
So yeah, like I think AI will only exacerbate this. So there is a light at the end of the tunnel. I don't want to do all the speaking. I want to. What are your views on all this? Apart from
I don't think
the
you've done. I think I've
depopulation
spoken
agenda?
quite a lot. I don't think you've done all the speaking. Yeah. Do you know what? It's funny because I feel like on this episode, like I didn't expect. I probably prepared for this episode less than I've prepared for any other episode, other than like reading that I've been doing. Well, means I've been doing some reading, but I haven't like planned out. Okay, I was going to talk about this. It's like, okay, you're going to lead this episode. It's very much something that you talked about, and I'm interested in it. I've been surprised at how kind of passionate I've been about this stuff and how much it kind of crosses over with a lot of the kind of concerns and stuff that I've got. Having said that, I'm in a weird space because as much as
You're not talking about my spare bedroom.
Yes, it's pretty fucking weird in here, to be honest. Like some of the shit over there, I probably won't mention that. And that cupboard, I mean, yeah. No, but like, although I sort of joke about conspiracy theories, but like I do, like, I'll be honest, I do think there's a lot of evil stuff going on. Mm-hmm. And I think AI, I've said from the start, I think the most likely outcome, and I don't know if that's 55% or 95%, is like a dystopian future. I also think more and more, like, I'm also more optimistic that like the utopia is not that far out of our grasp. And it is about like, there are some things that are going to happen in the next 2, 5, 10, 15, 20 years. I don't know. And how we as a human race react to that and what we allow to happen. Because that is the key thing. Like, I do think at the moment, we still have the power as people to decide which way this goes. If we stand up and if we make our kind of voices heard and we don't accept certain things. But there is a point that we pass, and this is absolutely because of AI. The perfect storm has been created by the pandemic and the sort of breakdown of the US, the 2008 financial, like all of these things, have come together to create this kind of perfect storm. And AI is both the catalyst, the enabler. Like, I find it amazing, like almost like the timing of stuff to me is like too coincidental. It's like I said, this kind of perfect storm. But AI, if it was managed in the right way, if it doesn't become super intelligent and have its own kind of, aims and take over, at that point, kind of all bets are off and there's nothing we can do. But before you get to that, there is a utopia. And I think, like, even us talking about this stuff, like I said to you when we had a sort of 5-minute break, the fact that us as a relatively mainstream podcast, right? Okay, me here, like the fucking crazy guy with the conspiracy theories, but I'm not a crazy conspiracy theorist by, in terms of like where some people are, where a lot of podcasts are, where a lot of social media, etc. is. The fact that we're talking about this thing says to me that this is becoming a pretty mainstream thing, that a lot of people are starting to wake up to the idea that this is a genuine threat to the future, because essentially it's like, this is not an episode about democracy, but this tech feudalism, like the way that tech is controlling things, and the fact that AI is the first ever tool that can allow this level, and I'm going to pull up another quote from the article, can allow a sort of level of control that dictators in the past could only dream of. It's such a risk. But a utopia is also like within kind of just out of reach. Yeah. Like, so for me, it's like, if enough of us really care and push that, I think like there is still time for the majority to, like, people power and like boots on the ground and feet and votes and hands still has power at the moment, but I don't know how much longer that is the case.
Yeah, I'll let you do your quote.
No, you talk while I find my quote.
Okay, you're finding your quote. So I do think the other thing that I wanted to mention, which I'm proud to say I've been right about all along, and I've been banging on about all along, is this open source versus closed source thing. And DeepSeek has thrown this wide open, and I do agree that like DeepSeek has been so important in terms of the influence that it's had. I think DeepSeek itself, like the importance of the specific model, has like that importance.
Yeah, it remains to be seen whether they end up being a big player or not.
That's diminished like quite quickly. And I actually think they might well be, because they've got some very smart people there. But what happened was it accelerated this kind of like, loads of other companies were then thinking models. They just banged them out. Clearly, some of this stuff was there in the background, but they weren't. It was a big sort of surprise attack in terms of like the release of DeepSeek, which forced them to show their hand. Which maybe like, I don't know what OpenAI's plan was. Maybe they were planning to eke this stuff out over 6 months and like, you know, use it to sort of maximize their profits, because this is what companies do. You know, companies don't release the latest and best models, latest and best products immediately. They always have like this kind of roadmap. So I think that's what DeepSeek did. There's been a bunch of other disruptions recently, but overall, the one hope I have with AI is that it does feel that there will be a level of democratization, because actually stuff's going to get so, like, the algorithms are going to get so better so quickly. The efficiency of them is getting better far quicker than we can Moore's law and all this GPU stuff. You know, like the speed at like it's not even in the same ballpark. Like the level of improvement that you get from like going from a non-thinking model to a thinking model, from going from a mixture of I mean, I'm probably using phrases that people don't understand now, but from going experts. From going from a standard model to a mixture of experts model, and these improvements are still happening, and each of them is like, instead of it just being like a Moore's law thing where it's like it doubles every couple of years, it's just like a 10x overnight. And so I think that like there is the possibility for a massive democratization with AI, and OpenAI have ironically been pushed in that direction as well by the release of DeepSeek.
I'll go to my quote, and it aligns it sort of segues perfectly in here. So credit again to Eric Wickstrom and the Am I Crazy Here Substack for this. So when he was talking about the technocracy, the AI component, artificial intelligence isn't just another technology in this vision, it's the key enabler. AI provides the means to replace human judgment, tools for total surveillance, systems for resource allocation, justification for eliminating democratic input. Here's a really key bit from what you've just said. When tech leaders discuss AI safety and control, they're laying the groundwork for a new form of social organization. The way I read that quotation is not saying we don't need AI safety and control. What it's saying is that when these tech leaders, when the big AI players talk about AI safety and control, and this is where it feeds into Jimmy's talk about open versus closed models, when they talk about safety and control as basically you need to not allow things to be open source, you need to give us all the power because we know better, that is what's creating that groundwork for social organization. Is that is giving complete control of a technology that has the means to completely survey society. And that's what I absolutely agree with you. You know, I was looking for it and you happen to talk about that and talk about open source. Yeah, I think open source is like kind of part of the answer here. And I do sort of wonder with DeepSeek, I don't know how much the state was involved in it, but I feel like it was put out there as a kind of bomb to kind of, you know, I'm not saying that like China was trying to like, you know, go in and save the world, but was sent into probably just like to fuck up things up and shake up what the US had done, but has had the effect of a really, really positive thing of kind of democratizing and opening it up and making people, I think, start to sort of question. Like they are, I think it's starting. I don't think it's enough, but I think it's starting this kind of question of, hang on, like, who are these people making all these decisions? So like I've said in one of the episodes, is like, is AI something we want, or is it just being done to us? You know, maybe we want AI, but the way that it's being rolled out is being done to us.
Could say exactly the same thing about Elon Musk.
Well, yeah.
Is Elon Musk something we want, or is he just been done to us?
Well, apparently, like 60% of Americans do want him, but I think...
Not sure about that.
I'm not sure how long that will last. That's for sure. I'm not sure how long him and Trump, like those two egos, I'm not sure how long Trump can stand someone being potentially more important and popular than him.
I think there'll be a fallout at some point.
I'm sure.
Yeah, it's been touted. But yeah, so I mean, to wrap up, like it's been quite a passionate episode. I think that like overall, I think these terms, you know, you can get wrapped up in like, you know, okay, techno-feudalism, technocracy, like they're just words. I think they're really powerful words because I think they, you know, they're a short, punchy way of articulating a lot of the concerns that people have about where we're going. And And AI, in my opinion, like we only really brought AI into it in the last 15 minutes, but the whole point is that AI is only going to accelerate this kind of thing. I would say check out some of the alternatives to the big tech companies, because there are a lot of really good ones. And I think most people, basically, it's a bit like Google is synonymous with search, right? I'm Googling it. That was what Chat GPT's become, or Chat GTP, as I think most people call it. But like Chat GPT has just become synonymous with AI, right? People who listen to this podcast, maybe you've tried out some of these other things, but I would seriously recommend trying out some of these other models when you're using AIs. Give Grok with a Q a go.
Venice.
Yeah, Mistral's got a model. Like, there's so many things.
Venice AI. We talked about it on a long time ago when we were like recommending like 10 tools or whatever. But like a tool where they have, their big thing is about not sharing data and everything gets deleted. It's not trained models. Like, I don't know how much you can believe it, but like what I mean is there are things out there like that you can make a kind of statement that this is what you want from your model. Although, like, is really the demand about like someone paying £10 a month? Is that, I don't know how much that's really going to make a difference.
Yeah,
I will come in a minute with like my views on what people should do.
Yeah, of course. As a sort of another option, if you want to pay for an AI, like I tried it briefly and I'm thinking about going back to it, but there's a really interesting, I wish we got sponsorship from these companies. There's a really interesting company called Mammoth. Yes. We'll stick it in the show notes.
Really, really interesting.
But they're like, I think it's like $10 a month or $15, so it's cheaper than most of the mainstream ones. It gives you access to most of them. Give you access to Claude, OpenAI, like ChatGPT, like all these different models, and you can play around with them. But like, I think there is a bit of a danger with just being like, oh, AI, that's ChatGPT, and then just using ChatGPT, because at any point, they can change their system prompt, they can change their guardrails, they can effectively, and not just they've got, ex-US generals on their board and things like that. Potentially, like, the US government can influence the kinds of responses these apps and tools are giving you. And so I do think that like, it's important to, I guess, try Bing every now and again. In the AI sense.
Shall I go?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
you'd have to ask my permission.
Have you finished? No, I didn't want to interrupt you because I think it's almost like this is our like final kind of arguments, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that was I finished.
Sorry, yeah.
Shall I edit this bit out?
I think you're probably going to have to edit this bit out. This is too bad.
No, I'm not. I'm not going to edit it out because I think it adds the reality to the podcast. All right, I'll give my view on this, like, which you'll be unsurprised is I think it's I think people need to be doing a lot more than that. I think there are two elements to this. So the first part, around what you kind of do on a day-to-day basis, like as someone who uses AI, like we sometimes talk about this, like I came around and you've been coding for like several hours today, so you've been using AI a lot. But I think on a general day-to-day basis, like I'm using it like, I don't know, 10, 15 times a day and using different apps for different things. Like I use AI a lot. So as someone who kind of like wishes it would just go back in its box and I could bury it in the ground, I do use it a lot because I also see a lot of uses in it. But I think my first thing to people would be like, the first thing against it is like, when we're talking about this idea of complete control is like, don't allow your life to just become about tech. Like, I know it's really obvious, but like, get off social media. Don't rely on everything for AI. Like I've started at work, I've started carrying a notebook around and writing stuff because I realized like I can't write properly anymore. And like, that's because I don't write. And I was like, it's quite nice to just be writing. I'm not saying for everyone's like, don't use tech, but I'm saying like go back to having interactions with people, go back to like community stuff, like do things that are challenging this whole kind of economic model of control by a few organizations, like buy local food, like engage with your community. Like there are really simple things you can do to create the world that I think like almost everyone I speak to wishes the world was. And it's like, if that's what you want the world to be like, no one is coming to save us. No one is coming to create that world for you. You are the person. Like we are the people that have to create that world. And if enough of us start to do it, we can have that world. It doesn't mean having no AI. It doesn't mean having no tech. It doesn't mean we're not going to have, AI AI workforce transition. It doesn't mean we're going to not have a future that's controlled by it or that is dominated by it, but like you can build that stuff into your life. Like I think that is so important, as like not allowing this to be sort of have its tentacles in every single aspect of your life. Like have the life of meeting people in reality, writing things down, playing guitar, playing the piano, like playing football, going out into nature, like that's part of it. The second thing is like you're going to have to realize when these things are coming in that are whatever, like however far down on the scale of the, like however far down the rabbit hole you are, and however much you think some of the stuff we talk about is nonsense, is like some of this is not conspiracy. Like digital currencies are coming, digital IDs are coming, right? If you want that and you want what that means, fine. Like, but understand what these things mean is these are all part of this move towards control of tech over everything. And you might think this is kind of just convenience, right? I live in a country where everything is paid for convenience on an app. Do you know what? I have a load of cash hidden in my apartment. It's not that much cash, so don't bother coming to rob me because it won't change your life. But I have some cash, like, because, like, even not on a conspiratorial level, like when there is a IT outage, like I don't want to be reliant on tech. It's like, think about when you are reliant on all that stuff. Think about when in your office the internet goes down and you can't do anything that day because nothing works. Think about that times a million because AI is integrated to everything. It's like start rejecting, like take the good stuff but start rejecting the bad stuff. Like
it will make a difference.
It will make a difference. Like I see this kind of movement for cash, and a few years ago I was like, well, why are you so bothered about cash, like swiping a card? And then now I'm a bit like, but it's not about cash in your hand, it's about what cash means. When you move to a digital currency, all it takes is the next government to be the government that declares that, well, I'm just going to link that to your social credit score. Oh, that's a China thing. Well, it's not, because they don't even actually have that in China. So if you listen and you've heard of this thing where everyone in China just, okay, people get banned from traveling. People in China don't have their money controlled because of their behaviors, but there's a system there, and that's in a country that's not a democracy. When you have that in your country that is a democracy, all it takes is a change of government, or it takes a controlling tool that we're talking about. This sounds dystopian, but like this is the default that we're headed to unless people make decisions that say we don't want to head in that direction. So like 2 bits of advice, like do more things locally, make little changes in your life, but also understand some of these big things that are coming in. You still have a choice whether you accept them or not. 2 generations on, maybe even 1 generation on, there ain't going to be a choice anymore. That's my kind of closing argument on this.
It's powerful stuff. I think that we need to shorten it a little bit, but that's our new mid-roll. The beginning part of it, I think, maybe a little bit at the end, but definitely we need to like get that down. To lighten it up a little bit, just at the end, I'm gonna finish with a really. I don't know why I came across this, but like I mean I agree with a lot of what you said. Just to sum it up, like not to I think it's up to everyone to make their own judgment as to where they are on that, but I do think that tech and the level of control over the Western societies that is afforded by some of these new technologies, and that's in the hands of like such a small amount of companies, all in the US to be honest, or the majority, is quite frightening. And it's really, coming back to what we talked about in the episode, like it's as much what you're talking about as in literal control as it is around influence about what people are thinking. And I think that's, for me, also a huge, huge, huge danger. Anyway, to lighten things up a little bit, I don't know why I pulled this up, but I found something that I said to Claude the other day, which entertained me. I said, write a sentence that uses the most adjectives you can use in one sentence in a humorous way. Here we go. I'm going to give this a good shot. The outrageously flamboyant, incredibly verbose, suspiciously enthusiastic, ridiculously overdressed, unnecessarily complicated, absurdly long-winded, hopelessly confused, thoroughly exhausted, slightly bewildered, comically serious, painfully meticulous, wildly incompetent, shockingly purple, surprisingly knowledgeably, questionably qualified English professor stumbled dramatically over his extraordinarily expensive, impractically tiny, ludicrously shiny Italian leather shoes, while delivering an excessively detailed, mind-numbingly boring, theoretically important lecture about the absolutely essential, fundamentally critical, woefully underappreciated importance of concise, clear communication.
See you next week, guys.
Shut off the machine. In the gleaming halls of silicon dreams, where algorithms hum their endless schemes, I watch as lords of data build their digital feasts, harvesting attention with invisible thieves. Each scroll and click becomes a serf's new chain, while techno-barons count their endless gain. Our labor track by eyes that never sleep, as we till digital fields the masters keep. The new lords don't need castles made of stone, just server farms and screens we call our own. They promise freedom while they track our lives, as techno-feudalism quietly thrives. The AI sentinels guard their master's realm, learning our patterns ready to overwhelm. Prediction engines knowing what we'll do, before the thought has even passed through. But in the garden where no signal reaches, where the wind through ancient forest teaches, I remember what it means to truly be in the natural world that sets us free. For all their codes and neural nets so fast, they cannot program what was meant to last. The human touch, a kind word spoken true, the soul's connection that sees us through. So find your people, look them in the eye, feel the earth beneath, look up at the sky. For in our hearts lies power they can't decode, a love fueled resistance to their crushing load. Before we're reduced to data points and trends, let's reclaim our humanity, make amends. The future's not written in binary lines, but in how deeply our compassion shines.